Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 17 wide receiver starter sits for the 2019 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about some news around the National Football League as it pertains to fantasy football, then going over the matchups at the wide receiver position, then closing out with my top 36 wide receiver rankings. Merry Christmas, happy holidays for all of you watching today's episode. Just wanted to go ahead and get that out of the way. If you want to leave me a present, go ahead and click that subscribe button, join the community, get that cursor past Stephon Gilmore, cornerback of the New England Patriots. Click that subscribe button, help us get to that 13,000 subscriber mark. We are ever so close. I really do appreciate everyone's support all season long. Also, don't forget to click the bell notification button to stay up to date on my latest content. And if you like today's video, don't forget to click the like button. Thank you very much. Hey guys, how's it going? I hope everyone's doing really well. All right, so again, this is Andrew recording on Christmas Day. It happens, that's what I do. I'm going to sacrifice for those of you who unfortunately are playing in Week 17. So let's get to it, shall we? In terms of some news around the National Football League, there really isn't anything much because, again, it's Christmas Day. A lot of teams didn't really practice or have full intense practice. They had walkthroughs here and there, but nothing too heavy. So no injury indications as of right now that are too major and specific. But as of right now, a couple things that I've been hearing, there are teams, let's say for example, like the Los Angeles Rams, that perhaps are not going to play their offensive studs, meaning the Gurleys, the Kupps, the Robert Woods, perhaps even Jared Goff this coming week because their game really has no, impact on their rest of the season. This is the final game of the season. They are not going to make the playoffs. So why would they put their future at risk potentially of getting injured in the final game of the season if they don't have to? They already indicated that Jalen Ramsey, their cornerback, will not be participating in this Sunday's game at home against the Cardinals. But again, this is the issue, right? We always talk about it. This is why you don't want to play in Week 17 because we are still uncertain of the whereabouts of who's going to play and who's not going to play this week, especially on teams like that who have nothing to play for. So we're going to try to keep tabs on that, and we'll see exactly where it pans out. But again, we have to, next season, please don't have a Week 17 championship week. Have it a week earlier. If you're going to do, 2-round matchups, make sure you start at Week 12. Make sure you're ahead of it so that you don't really have to worry about Week 17. Why, fantasy football, wide receivers, or running backs missing because of this, because of the fact that they don't need to play for anything. But anyway, let's go to move on. Let's talk about some wide receiver matchups going into Week 17, and let's get into it, shall we? Here we go. So starting off, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, despite giving up the most points to opposing wide receivers on a weekly basis, it's kind of crazy how they just completely shut down the Houston Texans. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins was pretty much nothing last week. He truly did not do anything. He was an absolute dud. But in the prior weeks, a lot of teams were able to take advantage of the matchup. Like Danny Amendola went for 100 yards. Marcus Johnson of the Colts went for 100 yards. These are guys that are not that good of wide receivers in comparison to, a Kenny Golladay or a DeAndre Hopkins or, like a DJ Chark. Yet, they somehow still had better performances. So there are pockets of this Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense that are slow to stopping, opposing wide receivers. But again, this coming week, Julio Jones, a guy that has been just seeing a bunch of targets, he should be fine. He's a stud. You're playing your studs as per usual in the playoffs. But again, this Tampa Bay matchup, even though they've been throughout the season pretty bad, as of late they've been getting better. All right, let's go to move on. Who else? The Miami Dolphins. I mean, Tyler Boyd's performance, if that wasn't enough to prove it to you, I think New England Patriots, sure, they have a bunch of wide receivers, but it's a lot of inconsistencies, right? We don't know if Edelman's going to be 100% healthy, even if they're going to play him, because all they're going to have to do is really run the ball against this Miami Dolphins defense. But again, N'Keal Harry could potentially, put together some sort of performance that could be of value, but I doubt it. But again, running the ball is probably going to be their main priority against Miami. Moving on, we have the New York Giants defense, the Philadelphia Eagles defense. In terms of stopping wide receivers, both of these two teams play each other. Should be a shootout. Both of them, respectively, are not great in the secondary. And yes, the Philadelphia Eagles, they're trying to make the playoffs with this next win and try to close this gap here. But the New York Giants are coming off a very good performance against the Washington Redskins. I mean, for the rookie quarterback, that is a huge confidence builder, and obviously for Saquon Barkley, who has struggled all season long, that is great, and it's a good thing to see going into the future. But again, both these teams, not great in the secondary. Should be easy matchups for both of them. Then we have the New Orleans Saints. Again, I don't think Will Greer is going to be able to take advantage of that. DJ Moore dealing with a concussion as of right now. Curtis Samuel is probably going to be the number one wide receiver there with Chris Hogan. That doesn't seem like a matchup that I want to go ahead and take advantage of. Then we have the Detroit Lions, the Minnesota Vikings. Both of them, same division, but the Detroit Lions, again, Aaron Rodgers hasn't been a touchdown fiend like he has in years past. Sure, he's going to get the ball to Davante Adams as much as he possibly can, and the yards are going to be there. But the touchdown might come short, which is an unfortunate factor, but something we have to pay attention to. And in the Minnesota Vikings, again, Xavier Rhodes has been really just, he's fallen apart this entire season. He is getting dominated. Speaking of Davante Adams, he got dominated by Davante Adams just this past week. And going into this matchup, they play against Chicago Bears, but Allen Robinson and Anthony Miller should be better plays than they were in this past week against the Kansas City Chiefs. Then moving on, we have the New York Jets. They'll take on the Buffalo Bills. John Brown, Cole Beasley, both of them have been playing extremely well this season, and their momentum's continuing into the NFL playoffs. Then we have the Carolina Panthers. Again, Michael Thomas is going to probably set another record. 145 catches might not be enough for him this season, especially for those of you in PPR. You love to see that. And then we have the Indianapolis Colts, who they will take on Gardner Minshew, but I don't think Minshew's going to get it done. Again, Chark was kind of a bait play last week. Chirs Conley's been the only, reliable receiver on their team because outside of that, their offense is really not moving the ball very well. I don't know why they've ended up the way they have, but again, hopefully they can improve, and we'll see what they can offer us next year in terms of wide receiver help. And then we have some of the tougher matchups. Of course, it's going to be tough because like a guy like Devonta Parker, you want to play him against the New England Patriots, but again, this is a tough matchup. Can you do that? Can you solidify that even when the Patriots are full force trying to win this game in order to make sure that the Kansas City Chiefs can't catch them? That's the issue that currently stands. And then we're talking about the Kansas City Chiefs. They get to take on Phillip Rivers, who likes to throw interceptions. That should be fun for them. The wide receiver position will get it done. Whether it's Mike Williams or Keenan Allen, one of them will produce. But again, it's a tough matchup. Then we have the Chargers. Speaking of them, on the opposite side, Tyreek Hill. We'll see how that goes. And then we have the Buffalo Bills, Chicago Bears, Dallas Cowboys, and all the other better quote-unquote fantasy stopping secondaries as of right now. Let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about my top 36 wide receiver rankings going into week 17. Again, this is going to be a little bit of a shorter video than I typically do. Like the running back video was like 10 minutes shorter than last time. I'll try to even make it shorter than that. We're going to be quick, concise, to the point. And we're going to start off with number 1, Michael Thomas. He's the best wide receiver in the National Football League. He is a must-start every single week. I don't need to convince you of it, and I don't need to talk about it any longer than that. He's the best. He's breaking records. They have to play this week in order to make sure that they clinch their playoff spot as a bye week number 1 or 2 seed in the NFC. Michael Thomas, fantastic play. Moving on. Julio Jones, great plays again. I mean, this is a guy that in the past 2 weeks has been far better than he had all season long. The contributions of what he did in the last 2 weeks alone has jumped him into the top 4 wide receiver conversation in terms of end-of-year rankings and half PPR scoring formats. Having caught the ball 23 times in the last 2 weeks for over 300 yards and 2 touchdowns, that is insane. The momentum's continuing. He should be great this week. Moving on to number 3, we have Davante Adams playing against the Detroit Lions. Like I mentioned again, Darius Slay's not probably going to have a great day against a guy like Davante Adams. But again, when we see Davante Adams being target funneled like he was just this past week, sure, Lazard or Allison, they'll catch a couple passes here and there. Mercedes Lewis in this offense, but again, this is a Davante Adams-led offense, and Aaron Jones, punching the ball up the middle. And Davante Adams looked fantastic this past Monday night against the Vikings secondary. Should continue to look good as they try to lock down an NFC bye week against the Lions. Moving on, we have DeAndre Hopkins as my number 4. Sure, he's coming off of a bad week, and it's unfortunate that he had a poor week in the Week 16 championship for many of you guys. But if you have DeAndre Hopkins, another one of these stud wide receivers, the number 3 wide receiver as it currently stands, the only other receiver outside of Michael Thomas to have over 100 receptions this season. He has 104 exactly, which is pretty insane considering how much of a gap there is between Michael Thomas and DeAndre Hopkins. That being said, we saw them play Tennessee just a couple weeks ago. The guy caught the ball 6 times for 120. Again, you're playing him. He's a stud. He's my number 4. Moving on to number 5, Tyreek Hill. Again, the volatility of Tyreek Hill is always there. We've talked about it. We mentioned it. We're going to go over it once again. It's there. It exists. Understand the risk of playing a Tyreek Hill and understand the reward of playing him, and then approach it with that. I think, yes, the secondary for the Los Angeles Chargers is tough, and they've got a great secondary in terms of being able to try to stop a guy like Tyreek Hill. But again, it's not an easy task to do that, even when you have the available players and the personnel to do so. A couple weeks back when they played against Tyreek Hill got injured early, so we don't have really much of a perspective on how Tyreek would dominate this defense, but we know he's going to have to use his speed. And again, understand the risk and reward of him. Moving on to number 6, we have A.J. Brown, who is getting into another matchup that he's recently played in. He played against the Texans a couple weeks back, and what did he do? Well, he had a fantastic game. A.J. Brown has been absolutely ridiculous in the last couple weeks. He might even surpass 1,000 receiving yards this season with a really slow start. In fact, sure, the first game of the season he had over 100 receiving yards, but as of late, he has really turned it on, scoring touchdowns in almost, 4 of the last 5 weeks. That's incredible. Even on the ground this last week to save his performance. This coming week takes on Houston. Last time he played them, which was 2 weeks ago in week 15, 8 receptions, 114 and a touchdown. Should be another good play here. That's A.J. Brown. Moving on to Cooper Kupp. Again, I don't know if Cooper Kupp's going to play. They might sit him because they're trying to sit their studs. But if Cooper Kupp is going to get the green light and they're going to try to light it up on these Arizona Cardinal defense, he is a fantastic play. Again, this is a guy that is consistently scoring for teams, and it's kind of insane. The guy has scored a touchdown each of the last 4 games total. Why? Because Jared Goff has thrown 2 or plus touchdowns each of the last 4 games as well. It is 100% correlated to the success of the quarterback of this Rams offense and how everybody else plays. This entire offense has been so much better in the last 4 weeks. Gurley, Kupp, Goff have all scored touchdowns each of the last 4 weeks, and it's paying dividends to fantasy owners for sure. Sure, his fantasy total isn't great because he's only seeing 6 to 4 targets per game and only catching it 6 to 4 times. And the yard totals are not there. But again, scoring a touchdown makes a huge difference. He's obviously the safety blanket in the red zone. Cooper Kupp's not a bad play here at number 7. He's a fantastic play, in fact. Moving on. Breshard Perriman's my number 8. Breshard Perriman, again, for the 4th week in a row, like I was mentioning, Breshard Perriman was going to be a good play last week because, again, they played Houston. Houston's not a good secondary, and don't let anybody trick you thinking that they are. Just because they got a couple picks on, 4 picks on Jamison Winston doesn't mean that they're a good secondary. Not to the slightest. So here's the thing. Breshard Perriman going into the Atlanta matchup should be great. He's had 12 targets last week. That is the beautiful part of this entire thing. If you picked him up a couple weeks back, you'll know, he is a very good wide receiver, and he's going to get a lot of opportunity. Now, when I say very good, I mean for what the options are around the National Football League, considering the offense that he's associated with, the opportunity he's getting, and his speed, he's going to get production. He scored, he had over 100 receiving yards this past week on 7 receptions. Obviously, he's going to be funnel targeted because he's the number 1 of this team. The touchdown upside will always be there. Perriman is my number 8. Not a bad option. Moving on to number 9, we have Mr. Allen Robinson. Again, Allen Robinson and his offense was pretty slow this past week. Obviously, we want to see them at least come out of the gate a little bit, hotter and put together a better game. But again, Allen Robinson still saw 12 targets, only caught 50% of his targets. Didn't have too much of a receiving total, only 53 yards. But again, still is a decent wide receiver play going forward because the opportunity's there, the touchdown upside's there, and they play against the defense that their number 1 corner has been really bad all season long. Xavier Rhodes, has not been up to par to say the very least. In fact, let's go ahead and find this, shall we? The Minnesota Vikings giving up the 7th most points to opposing wide receivers. Yeah, shall we? In the last couple weeks, Davante Adams went for 116 yards on 13 receptions. Keenan Allen went for 9 receptions, 99 yards. Then the week before, we had Kenny Golladay, 6 receptions, 58 yards and a touchdown. The week before that, DK Metcalf and David Moore, both combined for over 140 receiving yards and a touchdown. Courtland Sutton went for 113 on him. Amari Cooper went for 147. Tyreek Hill went for 140. Do I need to say any more? Allen Robinson's a great play. Moving on. We have Amari Cooper at number 10. Speaking of Amari Cooper, Cooper scares me, right? Again, similar to Tyreek Hill, understand the risk, understand the reward. You're playing against the Washington Redskins secondary, which is by far one of the worst in the National Football League. And even though they are not technically in the top 10 worst in terms of giving up points, it's mainly because they've been so bad on the ground as of late and stopping the run. The teams have really just ignored running the ball. But when we look back at what Daniel Jones just did to them, scoring 5 passing touchdowns, lighting up with linking up, with Golden Tate at an extremely high level with Sterling Shepard and Corey Latimer, and then not even have to worry about Darius Slayton. There's just a lot of potential here at the wide receiver position, and understand that, sure, there are other guys. There's Michael Gallup, there's Zeke, there's Randall Cobb, Tavon Austin. There's other receiving options here. And if Amari Cooper is going to be benched like he was this past week in that fourth quarter string there, I don't know what the full story is, but this could be risky. But anyway, moving on, my number 11 is Julian Edelman. Again, they're playing against the Miami Dolphins. That's a joke of a matchup. Should be an easy play. If he's healthy, he's ready to go. He should be a fantastic play this week. Top 12 wide receiver always, and been really great this season. He's my number 11. Moving on to number 12, Robert Woods. Like what we've seen from Robert Woods in the last couple of weeks, especially, obviously the last month of the season, Robert Woods has been a significantly better wide receiver overall, mainly because he's seen more opportunity and the quarterback play has, increased, to a good level and to the point where we can at least trust Robert Woods on a weekly basis. In the last couple of weeks, again, 11, 9, 18, 9, 9, 11. Those are his target counts. He's surpassing, 95 receiving yards. What is that, 4 or 5 out of the last 6 games? He's just too good of a play, and if he plays against Arizona this week, should be easy pickings. Last time he played against them, he had 13 receptions for 172. He's a fantastic play. Moving on, let's talk about my wide receiver twos on the week, and let's get through this. Number 13 is Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen, yes, plays against a tough matchup against the secondary of the Kansas City Chiefs, a defense that has progressively gotten better, but again, we've seen Keenan Allen throughout his entire career be very good against this Kansas City Chiefs secondary. Earlier this season, 8 for 71 and a touchdown. There really isn't anything that is going to slow down Keenan Allen except for his own team. The only thing that can hurt him is his quarterback play. But him and Phillip Rivers, they've been connecting. In the last 2 weeks, 10-plus targets apiece. Whether he catches those passes, that is up to the defense and or his ability and the accuracy of the quarterback, certainly. But again, he's been a decent wide receiver in the last couple of weeks. The target count is there. The opportunity is there. And that's why he's going to be in my lineup. Moving on. Number 14 is Courtland Sutton. Courtland Sutton's been kind of a disappointment in the last couple of weeks. Since they moved to Drew Lock, he had one good week against the Chargers. And since then, has really been a dud. But the thing that I liked seeing with Drew Lock is his target count. In the last 2 weeks, Courtland Sutton has had 10 targets apiece. Sure, he's only catching less than 50% of the passes on average that he's targeted in the last couple of weeks, but his depth of target is there, and eventually he's going to have a big game. This coming week, they play against the Raiders secondary. That is not a up-to-par secondary for Courtland Sutton and or this Drew Lock-led offense. I think he could potentially have a very good week here. Again, risk versus reward. I understand he's been inconsistent as of late, but I'm expecting him to have a good week. He's number 14. Moving on to 15, we have Sterling Shepard. I know Sterling Shepard's targets comparatively to a Corey Latimer or to a Golden Tate weren't up to par, but he is still getting targets as the number 1 wide receiver, and he's still scoring touchdowns for this offense. The way I like to see it, or think about it, if you're the number 1 on this offense, you're going to continue to see targets. You're going to play the most, and that's just going to give you inherent value going into your direction. Once, in fact, this or at least this defense for the Philadelphia Eagles tries to kind of contain Saquon, Sterling Shepard is going to be asked to do a lot this coming week, and he should be a good play. He's my number 15. Moving on to 16, Tyler Boyd. Now, at the end of the last week's game against Miami, he limped off the field, Tyler Boyd, with a quad injury. Hamstring quad, I'm not sure exactly what it was, but as it currently stands, if Tyler Boyd is healthy and ready to go this week, of course I'm going to play him. I'm not really afraid of this Cleveland Brown matchup. Now, I understand a couple weeks back against the Cleveland Browns, Andy Dalton didn't have a great game. And he was washed, and he threw a lot of interceptions, and that happens. But Tyler Boyd is a guy that, in my opinion, finally got a little bit of life juice right back into him. Sure, it was too late in the season for him to make a significant difference in terms of fantasy, but when it mattered most in the final week of the season, he dropped a 29-point game with the 15 targets. That is absolutely fantastic. This coming week, if he's feeling better, he's ready to go. I'm playing Tyler Boyd. He's my number 16 wide receiver. Moving on to number 17, John Brown, a guy that continues to somehow manage to find a way to score. It does not matter how he does it, but he will score. He caught the ball once last week, just once, but he scored a 53-yard touchdown. It does not matter how many targets he gets, how many opportunities he gets. He still somehow manages to surpass that 10-point threshold, even in one of the tougher matchups against a guy like Stephon Gilmore. But again, All he needs is one opportunity, one pass, another one of these speedsters that if he takes the top off defense could score. Against the Jets this week, pretty decent matchup. In my opinion, that's why he sits at a mid-tier, upper-tier wide receiver 2 option, number 17. Moving on, Terry McLaurin. Again, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, Terry McLaurin, or actually yesterday or a couple days ago when I was talking about free agents, Terry McLaurin in the last 3 weeks has been fantastic. He's scoring touchdowns, he's getting opportunity, his target counts are there, and he's getting a lot of usage. Obviously, they've been easier matchups. Playing against Green Bay, the Philadelphia Eagles, and the New York Giants, those secondaries are not fantastic. They're not top tier. But when you're the number 1 wide receiver of your respective offense, you're going to get opportunities that a lot of other players don't, and you're going to act upon them. Since earlier this season, obviously we've seen a downgraded Terry McLaurin, but the things that I want to go in and key in on is what we saw earlier this season with a guy like Case Keenum. With Case Keenum in the lineup, we saw Terry McLaurin scoring a touchdown almost every single game when they were a duo or a tandem. Since then, obviously Terry McLaurin has been less, but I think we're going to get back to a Case Keenum funnel targeting Terry McLaurin scenario, especially this week against the Dallas Cowboys secondary. We've seen him in the past play very well with Keenum under center and against the Cowboys. So I expect McLaurin to be a pretty decent play here as my number 18 wide receiver. Moving on to another matchup or another player in that specific matchup, we have Michael Gallup. Now, if in fact Amari Cooper is to disappear again, Michael Gallup will be given the opportunity to step up. Despite all the injury news that surrounds Dak Prescott and his shoulder, not practicing thus far this week as well, and the cortisone shots and the painkillers and being able to deal with the shoulder and the AC joint, it's unfortunate, but again, Michael Gallup is the number 2 wide receiver of this team. If Amari Cooper is to flub out, then we got ourselves a Michael Gallup potential game where he could take over, especially against this defense. He's done it earlier this season. If I'm not mistaken, he went for over 100 against this defense in week 2 of the season. Let's go ahead and figure this out. Week 2 of the season, nope, didn't go for over 100. He went for 8 for 68. It was over 100 against the Giants in week 1, But regardless, this past week, had himself a pretty decent game, 11 targets. 2 of the last 3 weeks, he's had over 10 targets. That's promising. Hopefully we can continue with that with Michael Gallup this week against this secondary that is truly struggling. He's my number 19. Number 20, Stefon Diggs continues his streak. He has scored 7 touchdowns against the Green Bay Packers in the last 7 matchups, once per game. That's beautiful. Continues. As of right now, Adam Thielen, he's just bait. He's not really presenting much. And from what we've seen from this offense, if they don't have Dalvin Cook back there, their best bet is throwing the ball to Stefon Diggs. And they'll probably try to key in on that as much as they possibly can this week if that's the case. Stefon Diggs sits at number 20. Moving on to number 21, we have ourselves Kenny Golladay. Kenny Golladay at least had a very good performance this past week, despite a tough matchup against the Denver Broncos. Kenny Golladay, again, is subject to his quarterback's play. If his quarterback is not up to par, if David Blau is not completing passes or not giving him opportunities to go up and make plays as such, then we're going to have a problem. The Green Bay secondary at times has been weak this season, but overall they're a pretty solid secondary. And I don't expect Kenny Golladay to have a huge game, but if he does, that's just the upside potential that he always will have. But otherwise, he's a great play. And my number 21 is a lower end wide receiver 2 option. I think he should be decent. Moving on to number 22, Jarvis Landry. Again, the Bengals secondary, not great. All they're going to really have to do is run the ball with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. They can easily win this game. Jarvis Landry will get peppered with targets here and there, hopefully 10 plus, which would be a great sign. And then after he's got a couple receptions here and there, maybe he has the upside of a touchdown. But overall, I think it's a pretty good matchup against the Bengals this week. Browns versus Bengals, another one of these in-division games. I think Jarvis Landry should be a decent play. Moving on to number 23, Mike Williams. Mike Williams, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Williams, let's go and see something here. Where did that? Oh my God, there's a lot of Williams in the NFL, huh? So I gotta really type in Mike. So be it. All right, Mr. Mike Williams gets to play against the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, obviously, this past week was a little bit of a dip from the 3 weeks prior because he didn't score a touchdown and he didn't have a huge yard total. That is something that obviously is inherently there with Mike Williams at all times. But the thing that I'm beginning to see more and more is that besides Keenan Allen, there is no Hunter Henry. And there really is less and less of a usage of guys like Melvin Gordon and or Austin Eckler. Mike Williams could have another opportunity this week. We've seen him in the past be pretty decent against the Kansas City Chiefs. But again, it's going to take a lot of passing and a lot of opportunities because we know how inconsistent Phillip Rivers is to feast for a guy like Mike Williams. But again, I think he's a decent option this week. Moving on to 24, Cole Beasley. The one thing that I love is that when I yell Cole Beasley's name from the top of the mountains every single week during the waiver wire pickups, and yet still he's only owned in 41% of leagues. But yet, in the last 5 weeks, Cole Beasley has scored 14 plus fantasy points in a half PPR. 4 of the last 5 weeks, he scored more than 14 fantasy points in a half PPR. Yet he's only owned in 41% of leagues. I don't understand it. I don't get why people don't respect Cole Beasley. The dude has 12 targets this past week, 7 receptions, 108 yards against New England, for the love of God. Yet he's still disrespected. I love the guy. He's my number 24 on the week, playing against the Jets. Moving on. Talking about the wide receiver threes of the week. Starting off with number 25, Odell Beckham Jr. OBJ has to sit on this list because, again, you play against the Bengals and he will have the opportunity of upside. That's pretty much all that it stands for. I mean, outside of the potential of him having a breakout game, he might not even play this week. Sure, he scored a touchdown this past week, but that was late. It was garbage time. I'm not really buying into it. But again, he has to stay on this list. He's one of these studs that has the opportunity of 10 plus points, maybe a 16, 17-point game. So he'll sit at number 25. Moving on to number 26, Greg Ward of the Eagles. Again, this is the number one wide receiver of the team at the moment. With the potential of Zach Ertz missing this week, Nelson Aguilar will miss once again. And then we'll go ahead and see ourselves with a Dallas Goedert and Greg Ward game versus the New York Giants secondary, who in my opinion, they should both be able to have pretty decent weeks. Moving on to 27, Robby Anderson. I thought Robby Anderson would be better last week. I knew that playing against the Pittsburgh Steelers, he was going to play well. But outside of only scoring 1 touchdown, the offense kind of sputtered and they kind of fell apart, which was unfortunate. But this week they play against the Bills. My only concern is Tre'Davious White. Where is he going to stand? If he sits on top of a guy like Robby Anderson, then we're going to have problems, and Jamison Crowder underneath is going to be the better play. So this is more of a Robby Anderson / Jamison Crowder kind of play. I expect one of the two to be good. Which one at this moment in time? Not 100% certain. But again, it's only Wednesday. Moving on, Justin Watson's number 28, scored a touchdown for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this past week. That's promising. Looks good to me. Again, he's the number 2 of the offense. At the wide receiver position in an offense that truly, they'll run the ball every now and then, but they want to pass the ball as much as they can in order to blow teams out. So Watson should be a decent play. Anthony Miller has fallen from, being almost a top 15 wide receiver last week in terms of the rankings to a 29. Now, that's unfortunate. I don't think that the Vikings secondary is that good to prevent Anthony Miller from having a big game. But again, there's always a potential of that, may be happening. Here's the thing. The only thing that I see is that we have to trust Mitchell Trubisky. That's the issue. When you talk about wide receiver 2s, sure, they don't have the talent or the opportunities the wide receiver 1s, so you really have to depend on the quarterback to get the job done. That's why Anthony Miller is at this fringe spot, because I'm afraid of what potentially could happen that happened last week. Moving on, Deebo Samuel at 30, playing against the Seahawks defense, should be pretty good. I trust them far more than Emmanuel Sanders. I know Emmanuel Sanders late in the game last week made some plays, so did Kendrick Bourne, but Deebo Samuel's the guy that, in my opinion, gets to start amongst all those wide receivers. But again, they're all playing second fiddle to George Kittle. Moving on, Devonta Parker's at 31. Again, I still see an opportunity in which you could play him, and he could be decent in garbage time, but that would, consist of Ryan Fitzpatrick throwing a bunch of interceptions and then eventually late in the game putting something together. But again, they are an NFL team. They're going to try their best and they could potentially score. Therefore, there's probably a group of people out there that really do think Devonta Parker could have a top 12 week again. I'm just saying be careful, because yes, the possibility is there, but the likelihood, not in my eyes, is probably not too likely. Tyler Lockett's at 32. Like I was mentioning yesterday, he was on a milk carton. We don't know where he was, but we finally found him. Tyler Lockett, he sits here at number 32 this week. Why? Because they've got to throw the ball to somebody. DK Metcalf didn't even pull a target last week. I'm a little concerned about this offense, but hopefully Tyler Lockett can figure it out. Moving on to 33, Curtis Samuel, again with DJ Moore out. I don't really want to take anybody into this matchup and hope that they're going to play well, but I don't think Marshawn Lattimore is coming into the slot position to cover Curtis Samuel. I think Curtis Samuel could run free, whether it's running out of the backfield, putting some design plays here and there. They could be some pretty decent points for Curtis Samuel to make if he pulls some targets. It just depends. Will Greer just did not look good enough, and he just only passed to Christian McCaffrey last week. Curtis Samuel only saw 5 targets, but again, he'll be the number 1 of this team this coming week. Kenny Stills is my number 34 because I don't expect Will Fuller to play. Still dealing with that groin, hamstring, whatever the hell injury he's dealing with. That's concerning, but Kenny Stills is playing well with the granted targets that he's seen. Golden Tate is a monster, has played well, whether he's getting targets or not. He's played very well since coming back from a little bit of an injury. Could be better in number 35, but again, there are a lot of mouths to feed in that offense. So we downgrade him just a tad bit because, again, Slayton or Latimer or Caden Smith or Saquon could all score, and then obviously Sterling Shepard. And then the last wide receiver I wanted to mention today is Chirs Conley. He's the only guy in the Jacksonville Jaguars I truly trust at this point, and I think that's probably the case with Minshew as well. Minshew's really only targeting him down in the red zone, and that is a pretty good valuable option there, especially in garbage time. Those are my top 36 wide receivers. These are my last wide receiver rankings of the season. I want to thank everybody for watching. If you have not yet already, click that subscribe button, click the like button. Thank you, everybody, again. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas. Congratulations for those of you who are listening to this, even though you have already finished your fantasy football season and won a championship. Good on you. Congrats. I appreciate everybody spending your time here today. Tomorrow, we'll be talking about some quarterbacks, maybe some tight ends. And then Sunday morning, 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, we'll be doing a live stream. Monday, we'll have another video. We'll talk about the NFL playoffs and all that kind of jazz. But other than that, I appreciate everybody spending your time here. And until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.